I remember sitting in a movie theater in Singapore in May 2012. I've just seen Marvel's The Avengers and totally blown away. As a noob, I was on my way out when all of a sudden the credits stopped and we got a little scene where I saw a purple head turn and smile into the camera. Little did I know back then what that actually meant. This Wednesday, I was sitting in a chair watching the Loki season 1 finale and two doors opened. I literally screamed at my screen. I guess I had my Thanos experience, and now I know what I should have felt 9 years ago. Well, better late than never. Hello, and welcome to the Review of Champions. It's time to talk about Loki Season 1 finale, Episode 6. And I have a nice little panel here with me, and let me introduce them to you. Starting voice only from the great beyond, Mr. Lord Deathman.
Hey, everyone.
From all the way from down under, it's Fisto's Gauntlet, or Shadow Biz, as we call him, or Biz, whatever.
Hello.
Hello. Mr. Optimistic himself, Taylor from Texas.
Hey.
And joining us again, our regular member and from the MCU's Bleeding Edge, Jeff.
It is wonderful, as always, to be on the podcast of champions.
Yeah, I share that sentiment, actually. Well, before we start, I would like to ask you all to hit that like and subscribe button and maybe join our forum on sakar.freeforum.net. Please also make sure to check out the YouTube channel of the MCU's Bleeding Edge. You will find a link in the description. We're gonna talk spoilers about this season finale for Loki. So if you haven't seen the episode, go check it out first and then come back to the video. Let's just dive right into it. Biz, you go first this time. I want to hear what you thought about that final.
I thought it was good, but it was like it was a lot of like talking. It was very like heavy in exposition wise, but I guess I had to kind of clear it up. But apart from that, yeah, like we got to be introduced to I guess the closest thing is Immortus, like we've said on the board, or the guy who the Kang. Who defeated all the other Kangs from the multiverse war. Yeah, like we got to see some battle sequences between Loki and Sylvie. You thought they would have like a stronger bond, but you could see Kang was kind of like manipulating them towards the end, or like pretty much manipulating through the whole show actually, but like specifically towards the end as well. Yeah, it was a good episode, but like very exposition heavy. But that you had to do it. It had to be done at some point. So yeah.
Yeah. You say Kang, Immortus, He Who Remains. What did you feel when you saw him? You know, Jonathan Mayers is playing Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man 3. So when you saw him show up, what? How did that feel?
It was exciting, but the thing is, as first impressions go, like he was like very talkative for a villain, for a very good reason. But the thing is, like, I don't know, I expected something to be like a little bit more intimidating, like that's what you think of a villain. But it is what it is. Like he was introed in the show. Maybe they're saving him to be worse in the movie, like to be like an actual villain, but. As far as it goes, it's a good intro. Good enough, anyway.
Jeff, what did you think?
Well, I mean, I was, I think, you know, anybody who has heard what I've had to say in the other reviews we've done on here regarding these Loki episodes, I've been very, prominent that I never really thought that we'd get a version of Kang in the series. I really didn't think it was going to happen. I thought maybe Easter eggs or something, but like not actually like full, out Immortus, like He Who Remains. Ever.
WandaVision, everybody thought we get Mephisto, we didn't get him. Like with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, everybody was convinced Reed Richards was going to show up, and we didn't get him. So you were a little bit hesitant to say, yeah, Kang is going to show up. I understand that, actually.
Yes, but at the same time, I think they did a good job, like as far as setting up the character and everything, and kind of giving him an origin story. Like for the MCU, I think they did a great job using this episode as a vehicle for that. But unfortunately, the episode had to pay a price at that point. Essentially, you know what I mean? Like that's the give and take, like of going in that direction. Like Biz said, of having all that talk and all of that like dialogue and everything like that with that real slow pace. It was it was an interesting finale. It was an interesting episode, but I feel like the same way that Lamentus was like a stepping stone episode in a way, and I feel like that's what the finale was. It was a stepping stone into season 2.
Yeah, not only that, but we will get to that later. Lord Deathman, Kang, Immortus, He Who Remains. Who did we not did we see actually? You with your comic book knowledge, you must know a little bit more. I know Kang was the first villain you encountered when you started reading comics, if I recollect that correctly. So help us out here. What did we see actually?
I'll quote the Bard in order to talk about Kang or Immortus. A rose by any other name, still Kang, the Conqueror. I mean, the person, the individual that you saw when Jonathan Majors comes out of that elevator is probably closest to Immortus. But I thought about it for a while and I was like, why wouldn't they name drop Immortus? Why would they go with He Who Remains? And the best reason I could come up with was a very practical one. It's kind of anticlimactic to name a villain Immortus and then watch him die in his first appearance. It's kind of antithetical to the name itself. Immortus implies someone who'd be around for a little while. But yeah, so Immortus is really Kang, from a comic book perspective at the end of his temporal life cycle. Immortus is the one who's been around the longest. He's had the most time to contemplate his time as a conqueror or as a pharaoh in ancient Egypt. He's the one that has kind of seen all of the other variants and kind of knows the most out of all of them. And he's usually the one that kind of intercedes with this kind of deus ex machina in the comic book stories to kind of put Kang in check or put Rama Tut in check or get them together on a similar agenda. But they are effectively the same person or variations on the same person that have sort of been warped and changed by time travel. But overall on the episode, I was just blown away that we actually got Kang. And again, I could echo the disappointments people felt about Mephisto or whoever it was you were expecting to show up in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I think what happened with those shows is that the pandemic changed their trajectory, and that meant that things that were going to dovetail into movies probably had to be truncated. It even probably happened here in Loki, as we can see that we didn't get a lot of the King Loki footage that was in some of the promotional stuff. But suffice it to say, I can understand all of the criticisms that are seen about this particular episode. People say it's exposition heavy. People did a lot of talking here. I'm not against talking, so that wasn't a problem for me. People also say that it wasn't very satisfactory because it left more questions on the table than it actually answered. I'm comfortable with questions. I don't really need everything to be pat and laid out for me. So that wasn't a problem for me. But just looking at the larger implications of what they've done with this episode with introducing Kang, I think that the MCU is just taking a huge leap forward in its evolution, and it has raised the stakes on the villainy that it presents with Kang, kind of in the way that you have to escalate in this genre. Every time you get a comic book for the month and you read about a villain, the next villain kind of has to go bigger. He has to be better and badder. And I think Majors, even though he gives a kind of wonky, insane sort of performance, again, we're going from someone who has a gauntlet full of costume jewelry, who just wants to eliminate half of all life in a single universe. But the stakes are much higher here. It's not your girlfriend. It's not a city. It's not a galaxy. It's, all of existence. We have someone who's been the invisible hand of all of time in the MCU, knows the record up to a certain point, and he represents a threat to existence on an almost existential level. And the fact that he's going to have these variants, that we might see Kang the Conqueror. I would love it if we get to go to ancient Egypt and see his Rama Tut incarnation. That gives a talented actor like Jonathan Majors an opportunity to show his range while playing effectively the same character. So I'm very excited. And whatever limitations this medium and this episode might have had, whatever criticisms you might have about For All Time Always, I think it is exceeded or counteracted by the potential, the storytelling potential of introducing Kang in this particular way. I loved it. It felt like one of the best episodes of The Twilight Zone you've ever seen. It felt like seeing a really great stage play, like the way they sit down and converse with each other, the way Major sort of makes his performance really big in trying to explain these ideas. It was like sitting down and hearing a really great campfire story that involves multiple universes. So I really think it was a great episode, and I love the potential for where it can take us in the MCU.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking when you were talking, He Who Remains. Aren't they also referencing the fact that this version of Kang beat the other versions of Kang, so he is the one who remained?
I got the sense, and in comic book sort of vernacular, that's the way you want to, sort of proposition it. Oh, he's the victor. He fought them all. But I got the sense from his narrative that he was the one that was able to sort of hold them back. It wasn't a defeat of all of those other Kangs. It was a stalemate that somehow, right, he was able to, because he says he only isolated one timeline, right? Like, it was like he couldn't grab the whole multiplex of all of the multiverses. He had to give them up to some other Kangs, but he needed to preserve at least one that hadn't been tampered with by a Kang, a sociopathic Kang. Like he represents the best possible outcome of a universe controlled by a Kang or a multiverse controlled by a Kang. So I didn't really see it as he had a confrontation with all those guys. I think he managed to hide a timeline, rebrand it as a sacred timeline, and then create his fictions around the TVA and the Time Lords. But his death, whatever mechanisms his life was that was sort of holding the floodgates of all of those Kangs back, with his death, we've now unleashed all of that.
Yeah, Taylor, the criticism of this final episode was indeed, in general, it was too much talking, too little action. But I've heard the other way around as well, that you get at the end of shows and movies made by Marvel Studios, a lot of action, and it's usually a lot of the same. So this was a little bit different. What did you think about that? How do you see this?
Well, like Biz said, there was a lot of exposition, but the MCU does exposition better than anyone else. All right, I mean, exposition is every writer's nightmare, but the MCU always seems to find a way to make it engaging and interesting. All right, whether it was the Ancient One explaining time travel in Endgame, or the Ego explaining his master plan in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. They always find a clever and creative way to do their exposition, and I think they did it again this time with Kang and his little cartoon demonstration of the history of the universe. So I don't think that it was too wordy. I don't think it had a lack of action per se. I mean, it's like you said, every finale doesn't have to be a giant CGI battle. So I had no problem with the episode in and of itself as an episode, and I think Majors did a fantastic job. I loved his personality in this, and I also think he's going to play multiple different iterations of this character or variants, and I think they're going to have wildly different personalities, and I look forward to seeing him do all of that. The problem I had with it is it didn't feel like a season finale. I'd be 100% satisfied if I knew there was another episode coming on next Wednesday, but there's not. I have no idea when the next episode is coming, and they literally resolved nothing. They literally resolved nothing in this episode. It didn't feel like a season finale at all. I can understand that you want to keep the story going into the next season, but literally nothing was resolved. In fact, just 100 more problems have been created at the end of this episode. So I was a little bit disappointed with that. But other than that, overall, like I said, it was a very good episode. I loved the aesthetics of the castle. Looked like a Bavarian castle from the outside, however, in a dark world like in the Lord of the Rings or something. And on the inside, you had the big cavernous hall with the statues of the timekeepers. And then I loved Miss Minutes coming in and meeting them at the door. And then again, people are complaining about it's wordy, but I'm a word guy too. And I thought the discussions and the debate between Loki and Sylvie and Kang about the future of the universe, and if who's lying and who's not lying, and does her revenge trump everything else? And so I found it all very interesting. I also liked the action scene between Loki and Sylvie. So overall, as an episode, I'm completely satisfied. I'm just not as satisfied with it as a season finale, especially a first season finale. Just a couple other points before we move on. The stuff in the TVA was pretty interesting. The fact that the TVA has gotten reset or something. Again, that's another big cliffhanger that they just threw on us at the end of this episode. But it was interesting. The discussions between Renslayer and Mobius. The very clever technique used by Mobius and the other hunter who had been aware of what's going on. The way they were able to trick the other hunters into seeing that they were in fact variants by taking them to Renslayer's real life, a point in her past before she became a member of the TVA. That was very, very clever to bring down the TVA, to show them all that we are variants. Look, our boss used to have a life on Earth as a teacher or a vice principal or something in a school. So I thought that was really clever. I thought Renslayer's performance, Gugu, I probably butcher the pronunciation of her name, but Gugu Mbatha-Raw, I thought her performance was great. And before I forget, I've been meaning to mention this a long time. Back in, I believe it was 2010, Gugu Mbatha-Raw starred in a TV series that unfortunately was very short-lived, but it was called Undercovers. And it's another genre type show. She plays like a super spy in it, and it's actually quite good. And it's available for streaming for free on Tubi if anyone wants to check it out. But those are my initial thoughts on this episode. Thank you.
Yeah, just to be clear, the TVA exists outside of time. So it's not another TVA from another timeline. It's the same TVA. It's only been reset by Kang. How and why, we still need to figure out. At least this is how I understand it. Do we all agree with that? Yeah, I think so.
Well, I agree that it's been reset. It's not another TVA. I'm not 100% sure Kang did it. He did. But we'll find out. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's a statue of Kang, so he has to do something with it. Has to be involved in it.
Which Kang?
Yeah, that we don't know. We will see. But I want to put that discussion for a little bit later in this review episode. So, without further ado, we're going to rate. Well, let's start with Lord Deathman.
Well, I think my greatest self-evidence is going to be a 10 out of 10. I really enjoyed the episode, and again, I'm not saying that I'm blind to some of the shortcomings. I do think a lot of the problems that people might have had with this episode are legitimate, and not accounting for taste, that's going to bother some people more so than others. But I also think that, again, the potential of the episode and how it's going to change the MCU is really something that all of the fans should be excited about. I don't know that this is going to pick up from right where it left off when we get to season 2. And that's something that I think we all need to sort of tamp our expectations about and be realistic. This whole multiversal saga is going to go through a couple of different movies. We might see Loki end up in a Spider-Man film or Doctor Strange. So by the time we're looking at Loki season 2, he might be in a totally different place. And I, for one, find that interesting, right? As long as the story concludes itself or ties up its loose ends throughout some other medium in the MCU, I'd be fine with that. And coming into a Loki season 2 where it might not have anything to do with time travel, that part might be over, and we might be seeing Loki in a whole nother context or a whole nother Loki entirely. So I think this is a pivotal episode, which is why, I'm giving it a grade that is as high as it is. A high point for me in the episode, among many, is, Kang's holographic PowerPoint presentation, where he gives you not only his own story, his own biography, but he also, with very little friction, again, this is really important to point out, but with very little friction, he kind of gives you the whole concepts of multiple universes or a multiverse. Now, those types of concepts, when talking about this with other science fiction and fantasy, aficionados, they're like, the only place you really see this is something like Doctor Who, right? And Doctor Who's presentation of these kinds of ideas usually has a lot of friction because they're all British. And they're like, you know what, if you don't get it, we're moving on. This is what's happening. But I think, somehow they've managed to lay out stuff that could kind of seem like a cop-out, an easy way to bring in characters from other universes. They've really turned it into a very elegant and thoughtful and cohesive look at a multiverse and how that might impact the series moving forward. So I just want to give them kudos. I'm looking forward to season 2, and I thought this was a great episode. So 10 out of 10.
Great. Taylor.
We're just rating the episode at this point?
Yeah.
9 out of 10. For all the reasons that I already gave. Again, all solid, good episode, very entertaining. Just not 100% satisfying as the season finale.
I understand. Biz?
I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. It was good, but it was just that I wanted more of a bang, and it just didn't give me that. I wanted a villain that was more, like, I don't know, I guess badass. So that's not like a, but yeah, it was a strange kind of finale because of course it had like wide-ranging implications by the end of it, but like it's pretty much like these two kids going into the principal's office. That's the way I saw it. Like you had like a villain, yeah, of course, but then you also had, even Kang himself pointed out that Sylvia and Loki are villains themselves too. So it was a strange dynamic there, and then because you had that bond built up between them, and then for them to be so fractured so much, immediately, it was a little bit weird. So yeah, that's why I give it. It's still a great episode. That's why I give the rating 7.5. Yeah.
Fair enough. I totally see where you're coming from. Jeff.
I feel like I kind of relate to what Taylor said at the end, that it just wasn't like a super finale episode, kind of, I guess. And then what Biz said, I really kind of felt very similar. I'm probably going to drop, like, I'd say an 8.5 maybe, or an 8, like an 8.5, I guess, like an 8.5. I think that Biz's rating is really accurate. I think that, like, but I did like it. I think, like Taylor pointed out, the TVA stuff was interesting. The end of the episode where Mobius doesn't know who Loki is and everything and whatnot was a great twist. Seeing the Kang statue and everything was a great twist. But at the same time, I felt like, from a standpoint of, like, from an episode to an episode standpoint, when you look at these Disney Plus series, as a whole, I feel like the energy that they had in the finale was kind of different than what we got in, like, episode 5, what we got in episode 4, episode 3. And I feel like it really was anticlimactic at times for me. You know what I mean? Like, look, like, these type of, like, I love dialogue too. Like, I can watch movies where all people do is talk, and I love it. Like I'm a fan of like dramas and stuff like that, and like historical films and stuff. But at the same time, you know, I feel like for a finale episode, you're kind of expecting there to be more going on with your villain, like Biz said. You know what I mean? Like you're kind of expecting a little bit more action and like a little bit more suspense. And I felt like I didn't get that from the finale. I didn't get that suspense really built up. Like I have it for season 2. Don't get me wrong, and I've got it for Doctor Strange 2 and everything. Like I love that they already said that Loki's going to be in Doctor Strange 2. That's great. I mean, it's definitely probably for me like that and Shang-Chi are probably tied for like the MCU films I'm most looking forward to seeing right now.
Not Eternals?
No.
No, I know.
At least not yet, unless they come out with a new trailer or something, and it really kind of blows me away or whatever. We'll have to see. But hey, I'm optimistic about the Eternals. I am and I'm optimistic about Captain Marvel too. I think it could be a good movie. I do. We'll have to see what happens. But yeah, I guess like I said, I give it an 8.5. I think everybody has had really great comments on as far as like explaining their ratings and everything. I just can't imagine giving that episode a 10 out of 10.
Well,
just not me.
It's good to have different opinions. Well, I rated a 9 out of 10 as well. That feeling that there should have been a little bit more also exists with me. And actually, normally speaking, I would be very harsh if that happened. Only the implications of Kang showing up, which we will discuss in a few minutes, elevates this episode to a certain level. So you cannot fault the episode at all. I liked actually that there was not so much action and a little bit more talking. So it was totally different. Just 1 point deduction because of that feeling of incompleteness. But for overall, I thought it was one of the best episodes of TV I've ever seen. And especially because of the implications. But again, we will discuss that in a minute. So that brings us to our next section. And this is the time where I talk a lot and you guys just have to listen for a while. We're going to talk... we're going to go to Cannon Fodder.
Cannon Fodder.
And we're going to see how it went the last few weeks. Well, I'm not going to take long. Overall, there were a few theories that the fans had that were right. The fans had, I gave them a score of 4.5 out of 15. The first episode, actually, they were on a roll. They said Kang will be the big bad of the show. Well, that happened. The TVA will be malicious in some sort of way. Well, basically, they were a tool for Kang, so I said, yeah, that's also true. And the hunted Loki is female, earned them their third point, because that was also true. The other one that was that I had to say they were right, sort of, is a theory that we discussed last week, where they said the person behind the TVA is Immortus. Well, kinda. He was not called Immortus, but as Lord Deathman explained earlier, that was it was sort of Immortus. So I gave that half a point for the fans as well. And there was one theory that they had right in episode 4, when they said that Frog Thor would show up. That actually happened. Well, how did the champions go? Well, the champions actually scored in all the parts where the fans were right. We also scored as champions. Only the panel was a bit divided on Kang, that he will be the big bad of the show. because a lot of holds, some selling, even from Mr. Lord Deathman. And yeah, the one where we truly failed was the Frogtor one. We all sold it. It was a complete sellout. And yeah, we were wrong on all accounts. So fans, you got us there. Overall, we did actually fairly well in all the other theories, and you can look them up in all the previous episodes. I don't want to spend so much time on this, otherwise you just hear me talking, and my English is not so good, and I'm quite boring. We were right because the fandom was wrong. We were selling, as you have noticed if you have been following this review series. And well, where the fans were wrong, they did not score, and where we were selling, we did score. So overall, it was a landslide. We missed 2 points out of 15, so that is 13 versus 4.5. It's a win for the champions. The champions remain undefeated like they did after the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We will have to see when Cannon Fodder will show up in the future. If they will come for What If, I don't think so. But for Miss Marvel, probably we will have Cannon Fodder back. So, champions, congratulations on your victory. Most of all, it's done by Jeff and Taylor because they keep selling. And, well, if you keep selling all those crazy theories, we will score. So, that was Cannon Fodder for Loki. Well, that will conclude our review for episode 6 of Loki, the season finale, season 1 finale, I should say. Before we finish, I would like to ask you to hit that subscribe button and notification bell on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter, like our Facebook page, join the forum on Sakar, sakar.freeforums.net. Check out Jeff's channel, the MCU's Bleeding Edge. That way, you will never have to miss us, and we won't have to miss you. Thank you, and see you soon for our What If and the Suicide Squad reviews. They're coming. Bye.